Today's topic is very close to my heart, and I've been hearing this story since I was a child, and it had a very profound impact on my way of thinking and the way I looked at the human behavior and the way I perceived human nature just keeps changing the more and more I keep exploring the different aspects of the story. And even if you're an atheist, or even if you're someone who doesn't want to subscribe to any branch of religion or a culture, you should listen to this story. And you should listen to the discussion that we will try to hold afterwards. And we will try to differentiate between different aspects of human nature as well as human emotions. And it is going to be a fruitful discussion. So, even if you don't believe in any kind of religion, you must listen to this story, because I believe that the biblical literature, as well as the Quranic literature, and even the Indian cultural literature, gives us the best tools and strategies in order to understand the human nature better, because it gives us those insights on social dynamics that are actually based upon hundreds of thousands of years of experience. And in the case of the Abrahamic religions, tens of thousands of years of experience. And that experience has accumulated to such an extent where it gives us a very strong account of a set of behaviors that are practiced by the human beings time and time again. And then it gives us the common patterns which exist within the human nature. And so it helps us to understand the social dynamics better than any other literature that is present on this planet. So, even if you're an atheist or you're an agnostic and you're listening to this, just give it a bit of attention and you will try to understand a lot of things, and there will be a lot of things to learn today. And so, this story is going to be the story of Cain and Abel. Now, those people who are not familiar with this name, Cain and Abel were the first males on this planet after Adam, which means that they were the first sons of Adam and Eve. And Cain was the elder brother, while Abel was the younger one. Cain was conducting agricultural activities and was a farmer, and Abel was a shepherd, and he used to take care of a cattle farm and a goat farm. Now, both of these brothers are actually perceived to be the representatives of the different aspects of the emerging civilization of the Homo sapiens. That was agriculture as well as animal husbandry. Now, both of them had the habit of sacrificing a portion of their possessions in the way of God. Now, from an evolutionary perspective, there is a very strong rational justification for this action. And that is that human beings have always been aware of their irrelevance in the eternity of the cosmos. We know that we are very, very weak creatures when it comes to our competition with the wild nature of the cosmos that is around us. We know that we can be vanished the next day if any kind of turbulence happens in the system of space. And we know that anything can happen and it can actually destroy each and everything that we have built. We have this innate fear in our minds, and that fear can only be conquered if we can psychologically convince ourselves that there is a power that is better than us, that is stronger than us, and that has more access to resources than us, and it can protect us from each and everything which is happening around us, because it is the source of creation. So, different cultures, different religions, and different dogmas have different ways to subscribe to that divine entity. But the most common factor which is present in all the religions and all the cultures is that human beings have always perceived this notion that if they really want to gain the approval of that divine entity, they will have to sacrifice their most valuable possessions in the way of that divine entity. Or we call it God, we call it universe, we call it whatever you believe in. So, sacrifice has always been a very, very strong source of building that connection with that divine entity, because it is going to give you a sense of relief that that power is watching for you, and you are valuing that connection with it, and you are showing the value and you're showing the importance of that relationship by giving your sacrifice, by sacrificing what you hold dearest to your heart. And the same process was repeated by both of the brothers, and they were sacrificing their valuable possessions. However, the difference was that the elder brother, Cain, was just offering the less important parts of the crops that he was growing. But on the other hand, Abel was offering the best parts of the newborn babies of the animals that he was holding. Now, what happened was the quality of the Abel's sacrifice outperformed, outmaneuvered the sacrifice of Cain in each and every way of competence. And that's why, because of the intention, devotion, and dedication, the sacrifice of Abel was accepted. However, the sacrifice of Cain was totally rejected. Now, this was something which created a lot of emotional turbulence within the mind and the heart of Cain. And he literally became really, really jealous towards his brothers, because instead of looking at the quality of his sacrifice, he diverted his attention and he started perceiving his brother as the main enemy and as the main problem. And that was something which was also mentioned in the Genesis, where God said that evil is crouching at your door, which means, or that's interpretation is that your emotions are hijacking your rational ability and your ability to think and your ability to logically analyze that what are the mistakes have you made, and instead of focusing on that, you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're considering your brother your enemy. However, Cain didn't listen to God, and as the story goes, he deceived his brother and took him with him into the field and killed him. And that was the first murder in the history of humanity according to the biblical literature. And when he went back to meet God, God asked him that, where is your brother? And he defied all the responsibility by saying that he doesn't know where his brother is. He's not his God. He's not his defender. He's not his keeper. And so God said that your brother's blood is crying to me, and all of the privileges of the agriculture will be taken away from you, and you will have to become a wanderer. Now, that was a very big insult. But the biggest matter of concern for Cain was that if God leaves him and abandons him, he will be killed by all those violent human beings that were present around him. So he asked for forgiveness and he asked for protection. We can say that he actually asked for protection, because he was not guilty of what he did. So God gave him a mark of Cain, and that mark of Cain actually became the reason behind his survival. And then from his brothers, from his son's name, Enoch, the first human civilization was formed in the form of a city. And that's how the human civilization went on. Now, what can be the moral of this story? You can perceive anything that you want to perceive from this story. You can listen to it over and over, but every time you're going to come up with something which is going to blow your mind. And it is going to give you some very raw psychological as well as biological facts that can help you to understand human nature better. But the first question that we need to ask ourselves, that if we don't keep our emotions under check, what kind of disasters can happen in our lives? That should be the first question that we must be asking ourselves. And what we need to understand is that the first thing that we should do is that we should understand that what jealousy is. Jealousy is actually a fear of loss. It is a fear that we are going to lose something valuable just because we are less competent at sustaining it than someone who is reasonably better than us in every metric of human competence, and he is going to outmaneuver or outwork us and is going to get every valuable thing that we have. That's when jealousy comes in, because we know that we are not going to keep this thing because we are less attractive and less competitive than the one who's going to take this thing away from us. And that is something which starts playing with our head. That is something which starts playing with our emotions. And when you're absolutely focused on losing something, it is going to be a very, very painful situation, because now that person that you're jealous of has become your mental point of origin. You're thinking from his perspective. You are focusing on how that person is going to react, and then you're forming all of your strategy according to your enemy, the one that you have perceived as your enemy. Your mind is messed up. You cannot think straight. You cannot live a normal life because now your mind is hijacked by that one person that you're perceiving as your enemy, and you're making all of your moves just to make that person look inferior and to just defeat them. But what you need to understand is that unconsciously you have this thought in your mind that you cannot beat that person. You're actually suffering from unconscious incompetence, where you know that you cannot beat that person because you're fighting that person in their terrain. You're trying to fight that person in their own game, and it doesn't work like that. Now, what do I mean by that? It means that, let's say that there is another person who comes at the workplace, and you're a salesman, and he's more attractive than you just because he's physically fit, he knows how to talk, and he's very charming, and he has taken one or two of your clients as a result of that. Now, what you do, you go to the gym and you start becoming shredded. You also become really fit. You start working on your communication skills. Not that these are good things. You're trying to outcompete that person in terms of all of those outcomes that you can directly control. But what will you do about the height? Like, you're 5'9" or 5'8", and that stud is 6'3". So there are some things that you cannot do anything about. If you're freaking out about those things that are genetic, or those advantages that that person has over you in terms of his academic background or in terms of his sophistication or anything which cannot be matched, what you are doing is that you are actually playing in that terrain that is theirs, and you cannot defeat anyone while you are trying to defeat them in their home, because there is a very low probability that you can defeat them. And even if you defeat them, you're not going to get that emotional fulfillment that you're looking for. And so as a result of that, what you need to understand is that instead of becoming jealous to other people, or instead of becoming insecure about your position as a result of someone trying to surpass you, you should ask yourself some fundamental questions. And these questions are going to be tough, because if you don't understand the real dynamics of the problem is going to persist. Your life is going to stay miserable, and nothing good is going to come your way, because you're absolutely hijacked by that emotion of jealousy, by that emotion of insecurity, by that emotion of inadequacy, by that emotion of weakness. And nothing is going to work your way. So the first question that you need to ask yourself is that instead of focusing on your enemy, just like Cain was focusing on his brother and perceiving him his enemy, you must be focusing on your inner weakness. You must be focusing that what's wrong with your sacrifice. You must focus that what is the main thing, or what can be the changes that you can make in order to make your life better. Or what are the changes that are absolutely necessary? Because most of the times we are not very much affected by someone else's superiority, but we are absolutely unconsciously insecure about our own inferiorities, because these can be those skills that we haven't worked on. Maybe you haven't worked on your skills as much as was needed, and so now somebody's outcompeting you just because they're outworking you. So if somebody's making 100 calls and you're making 20 calls, and they're generating better leads than you, better sales than you, that's inevitable. So if you want to beat them, you can make 200 phone calls, 300 phone calls. Now that is something where you're trying to measure your outcomes in terms of those actions that are directly under your control. So when you're doing that, you're trying to focus on the real problem. So the next question that you should ask yourself is that problem curable? Can you cure that problem? That should be the question that you might be asking. That the problem that I have, you should ask yourself, can it be cured? And 9 out of 10 times that problem is curable. Sometimes you have to work on something that you're not working on in order to increase your competence. Sometimes you just have to ignore because it is something that is genetic and that person just has it, and you cannot do anything about it. And then you should see and learn that what are the best moves that you can make on the table of chess, and to just keep the best side to you, the best side of the bargain and just keep moving on. Because sometimes you cannot just compete. It is simply not possible. You just cannot compete. So you must have the ability to let go of what you cannot compete. And the next question that you should ask yourself is that if this problem is curable, are you willing to make the change that is necessary? That should be the question. Are you willing to make that change? Because sometimes the dirty rush of that negative emotion is way, way attractive and addictive than coming out of that loop of misery and trying to act your way out of it. Most of the times, people just want to stay in that miserable condition because misery loves company. You can find other people who also believe that the world is against them, and you can sit with them and you can complain for all day, and it is going to be much, much emotionally gratifying and satisfying than actually taking all the responsibility and moving out. So you are focused on the wrong thing, and you are looking at the probability of curing it. And the next question is that, are you willing to get out of it? Because if you're not willing to get out of it, there is no cure for indifference. If somebody is not willing to be cured, that person cannot be cured. Even the advice of God was ignored by Cain because he was not willing to let his jealousy, to let that dirty rush of emotion go. And so, once you're willing to make that change, the next question that you should ask yourself is going to give you more opportunities to self-explore. And that is that, what is the underlying problem for that jealousy? Most of the times, when you're angry, the real emotion behind anger is not anger. It is going to be jealousy. It is insecurity. Or if you're trying to be too controlling, the underlying cause of that too much control or that dictatorial behavior can be that maybe in the past, while you were acting on something, you gave away some control to the team members and it backfired. It had catastrophic consequences, and now you're not willing to trust on anyone else because you think that you will have to control each and everything, and now you have become that insecure person. So try to understand that what is the underlying problem that is becoming the cause of that problem. And once you know that, the next question that you should ask yourself is that, is your ego too big? Is your ego too big to ask for help? Because most of the times when we are working on something and that thing is actually our occupation, we become too egotistical when it comes to asking for help in order to improve, because we think that we are the best at it, and the best never seek for help. That's how we think. And that ego never lets us grow. That ego actually never lets us come out of that loop of misery and helplessness. And we just stay in that cycle of that emotional turbulence, and we just keep hurting ourselves. So when you ask these 5 questions, you are absolutely going to realize that how many times we let the negative emotions dictate our decisions and actions. Now, decisions and actions are the only 2 commodities that are directly under our control. We can decide what we want to focus on, and then we can decide that how we want to act. These are the 2 things whose intensity and whose execution is totally dependent upon the human beings, and there is no other thing that is involved in it. So when you're letting your emotions rule, what you need to understand is that emotions are designed to help you to make quick decisions according to your survival needs. If you are in a high stakes situation, obviously you don't have any time to sit and think rationally and think for hours in order to get out of the situation. You have to think on your feet. You want to get out of that situation, and you want to get out of it now. So in those situations, anger, fear, anxiety, these emotions are going to help you in order to give you a quick review of the situation and to make those quick decisions and to either stay there or to get out of there. However, when you're trying to make your long-term decisions under the influence of that emotion, because our survival instincts just want to stay involved within our decision-making process all the time. So we must be focusing on, if we are always trying to let our emotions lead our thinking process, what's going to happen is that if you're angry, what you're going to do is that you're going to say and act in a way that you're going to regret later on. If you're fearful, you're going to exaggerate the situation and you're going to act irrationally and you're going to regret later on. If you're under the influence of love, what you're going to do is that you're going to make those promises that you will not be able to fulfill once that rush of love is gone, and you're going to regret later on. So the outcome of any long-term decision that is made under the influence of a strong emotion is regret. And regret is not a very good thing to live with. So what you should do is that instead of focusing on your emotions, you must force yourself to make rational decisions. And when you really, really become good at making decisions rationally, what's going to happen is that instead of focusing on your emotions, there is something else which is way, way intelligent than your emotions, and it is going to develop. And that's what we call your fingertip feel. That's what we call your instinct. That's what we call your gut feel. And it is going to develop because you're always thinking on your feet, and always thinking intelligently and giving time to the thinking process. So even when you're going to be in the crisis, you will not be acting under the influence of your emotions, because now your thinking process has become so intelligent that it can even lead you in pressurized situations and to get you out of them. And even under stress, you will have the muscle to think with your instinct, because when you are under a survival condition, you need speed. And with that speed, if you can refine your thinking process in a way that you actually focus on your instinct instead of focusing on your emotions, you're going to have a very peaceful and a very strong, adventurous, and a very controlled life. And at the end of the day, control is everything. If you don't have any leverage over your impulses as well as your actions, you're a toast. Then you will be exploited from each and everywhere that you will turn your face. So when you know that these are the changes that you're supposed to make, and you're observing that that's how your emotions are trying to ruin your life, the next most important part is that you must take 100% responsibility for the betterment of your life. And sometimes the process of taking 100% responsibility can be debatable, because you can ask that you're not responsible for everything which is happening in your life. Sometimes there are a lot of processes that are external and that they are directly out of your control, and you cannot do anything to make them better. So how can you take responsibility for something that is not under your control? Which is a valid argument. But the validity of this argument is the whole point of it. If you cannot control something, then what's the point about being freaked out? Then what's the point of being pissed off at it? You cannot control anything in the external environment. But since from an evolutionary perspective, we are always going to be anxious about those things that are not under our control, and we are not going to become content and satisfied by the fact that we control a little bit of a very little portion of this situation, and it can actually be used to make our lives better. We are not just willing to invest that much time into it. And that's the problem. As we have discussed, there are only two things which are directly under your control. One is your decisions, and the other is your actions. If you're trying to control anything except that, as we said, you're just a toast. Then you're just a toast. And you're just going to be used and exploited for the grand purposes of the evil. Now, evil doesn't mean Satan. Evil means anybody who's trying to exploit you for their own means. They will be able to hit your emotional buttons, and they will be able to control you, because you don't have any process through which you can analyze things in a rational way. And that's exactly what happened to Cain. He became the victim of his own emotions, because he was not able to differentiate between what was urgent and what was important. The urgency of the emotion convinced him to kill his brother. However, had he had focused on what was important, that was the approval of God, he would have made the quality of his sacrifice better. But he didn't do so. He acted on the urgent impulse, and he totally ignored the important rational side of the situation. So ask yourself, are you becoming a Cain, or are you becoming a rational person in your life? That should be the archetype that you should be trying to avoid for the rest of your life from now on. And so, if you really want to know that what is important in your life, the question that you should ask yourself is that, what if you cannot lose? Now let me describe this in a very concise way. Let's say that your last goal is to become a great public speaker. and you have set a goal for the next 5 years that you're going to work your ass off, and you are going to work in such a way, you're going to grind in such a way that you're not looking for rewards in the next 5 years, you will be just working on your goal. But you know that there are bills to be paid. You know that you have to take care of your home. You know that you have to take care of your mother. You know you have to take care of your father. You know you have to take care of your children, your offspring, or your siblings, or whatever responsibilities lie on your shoulders. You know that the urgency of those responsibilities will not allow you to chase that long-term goal, because you will have to have a job, and then you will have to give time to your people, or those that are your loved ones. Now that's urgent. Now I'm not saying that do not look for a job or do not take care of your finances and actually become a broke person. Obviously you have to have a job, but the question that you need to ask yourself, that after 5 years, will that urgency matter? Well, there will be love. You will still love your loved ones, but at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that you're going to regret each and every decision that you made under the impulse of urgency, and it is going to piss you off, and your life is going to be miserable. So you will have to focus on your main goal 80% of the times, and for the other 20% of the time, you will have to find some ways in order to create ways in which you don't have to give a lot of input, but you can create some kind of money that can help you to take care of you and your loved ones. And if you are a bachelor, if you're not married, then 99% of your focus should be at the accomplishment of your goal, and only 1% to take care of your finances, because your needs should not be that high in that regard. So when you take care of these things, the last thing that you should do is to understand that the accomplishment of all these objectives that we have just discussed is going to take a lot of time. And in that time, you will have to take a lot of leaps of faith. And faith is something, it doesn't matter whether you subscribe to any branch of religion or not. Faith is something which has been with the human beings since we have evolved. And that faith has actually helped us to tap into uncharted waters and to explore our potential. It has always been with us. It will always stay with us. It doesn't matter how sophisticated the technology becomes, the human faith is always going to hold supreme, because it helps us to deal with the uncertain situations with a firm sense of conviction, because we know that whenever the time comes, we can seek the help of something which is far, far intelligent than us. And that faith is actually a change of mindset, where you should be able to find blessing for every curse that you receive. In Chinese, they use the same alphabet for crisis that they use for opportunity. So what you should do is that you must be forcing yourself all the time to stay on the positive and just act on it. And it's not some wishy-washy thing where you're trying to chase that fancy and flashy stuff and you're saying that I'm going to always chase the positive and I'm always going to think positive. No. If it's a crisis, you must ask yourself that what are the tools and strategies that you can use to extract the best out of this crisis? And that's your opportunity. Let's say that you're working and nobody else is noticing. What you should do is that you should be focusing on something like, okay, how can I make this thing better? Now I'm in isolation. How can I increase my skill level? And once your skill level is to that level where you can be perceived as an expert, wait for the opportunity. Because if you get the opportunity and you're not prepared for that, that opportunity is not going to be of any use to you because you're not prepared for it. So luck is when effort meets the opportunity. So keep putting your effort, keep doing your part. And what's going to happen is that a day is going to come that seemingly dangerous situation or that curse is going to reveal its true nature to you. And it is going to be like you wanted to tread on a path and you wanted it so desperately, but there was some power that was stopping you from treading on that path, because you didn't know that just a few blocks away there was a beast that was hiding in the bushes and he just wanted to eat you, and you just didn't know that. And after a few years, when you looked at that particular moment in your life and you perceived that how dangerous it could have been to your survival, you just thank to God, you just thank to universe, you just thank to each and every power that you believe is supporting you and is protecting you. So sometimes the decisions that are delayed, or the decisions that are actually reverted or are abandoned, become the saviors of our lives. And when we become content with that, what's going to happen is that two things are going to happen. And the first thing, we are going to be absolutely concerned with the process. We are just going to forget about the outcome. We know that the outcome will take care of itself if we just keep focusing on the process. We hand over the outcome to something that is more powerful than us. And in the end, we just keep moving forward. We don't even care what comes next because we have absolute faith in our abilities that we can handle everything that comes our way, because we have a complete faith in something which is larger than life and which is more powerful than us. When we have that kind of a mindset, when we have that shift of mindset where we are trying to seek blessing from every curse that comes our way, that's when we can actually get rid of our emotional turbulence and we can conquer our emotions. And as a result of that, we can conquer our lives. So, stay positive, stay emotionally stable, and have faith. Till the next time, peace.